All right, everyone, we are ready to get started. Again, please feel free to file in, fill in seats, and again, you can drop your questions in the chat by scanning either QR code on the sides of the room. And with that being said, please give a loud, warm Microsoft Build welcome for Amanda Silver.
Hey, everybody. Hello, spring in Seattle. I'm Amanda Silver. I'm the head of product for Microsoft's developer division, and we're the team that brings you all of your favorite developer tools like Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, TypeScript, .NET, our Azure application platform, and I'm also the general manager for Microsoft's internal engineering systems, which is the platform engineering team for the entire company. So we build all of the tools that all of the engineers at Microsoft use every single day to build all of the products that you all use and love. All right. So, I've been working at Microsoft for almost 23 years now, I think, and I've always worked on behalf of developers. I love my job because the future always starts with developers. Developers really determine the speed of innovation, and that has never been more true than in the age of AI. But the truth is that developers get bogged down. They're overwhelmed by complexity, and they continually have to context switch between tools, which impacts your cognitive load and your ability to focus. On average, developers only spend about 2 hours a day coding, and it takes them 23 minutes each time to regain focus after context switching. There's a constant pressure to ship faster while also being expected to master new technology. And meanwhile, you're dealing with engineering systems friction, like waiting for those automated tests to pass, or waiting for your compiler to compile already, or just waiting for that meeting with the operations team so that you can actually get access to the resources that you need to be able to do your job. And all of that really makes us exhausted by the end of the day, and it starts to feel like drudgery and toil. And it's super inefficient for your organizations. But there is a path to bliss, and we've been on it at Microsoft. A path to developer happiness, where you can get into the zone and stay in the flow. Learning new tech is one of the most exciting parts of the job. Developers are lifelong learners, and you like to feel productive while you're learning. And paved paths can really make it so much easier to ensure that your app is secure, and it's compliant, and it delivers the quality and performance that your users expect. So our guiding principle within my team is to ensure that as developers, you can focus on writing the code that only you can write, the bits that are absolutely unique to your scenario. And everything else should be provided by automation or guidance or boilerplate code that's really easy for you to incorporate into your application. Now, we aim to meet you where you are at your skill level in your favorite code editing tools so that you can stay in the flow. And with that, I know that you guys all want to see code as soon as possible, so let's get straight to it. I'd like to welcome Shayne Boyer, who's going to show you how GitHub Copilot and Visual Studio come together to make it easier than ever to stay in this flow while learning.
Cool. All right, am I on? Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. All right, so here I am in Visual Studio, and I am happy to say that we have now converted our eShop application to .NET Aspire. .NET Aspire has been GA'd as of today, super excited about that. And I'm really happy that this now takes away the complexity of trying to do a distributed application in the cloud. I'm really easy, I can just jump in and say distributed application here and set that up. I'm able to now just create the composability by just adding my Redis cache here. I can now add Postgres here by just defining my .with image and using a Docker container, and then also specifying that image tag using the latest there. I can then create my databases by just saying add database and defining what those are named. Further then, I can now compose my APIs. You can see I have a basket API, a catalog API, and typically I would have to learn how that's all put together. But here I say .with reference and add on my service bus, my catalog, and all of that. Now, I'm still trying to get an understanding of how all of this is put together and what the eShop application really does. So I'm going to use my favorite pair programmer, Copilot, and I'm going to jump down here into the window, and I'm going to say, what does this eShop, if I can spell eShop, solution, and I'm going to use the pound here to kind of ground my question, and say solution do. And what this does, it will actually look at everything that's in my Visual Studio solution, all the projects here, and try and kind of create a summary for me as to what those things are doing. Typically, we'll look at the code, the references between them, and the super fast comes back and says, hey, we've got an app host, a basket state, some ordering things, and gives me a really good idea of what we're trying to accomplish in this
That's a
application.
really awesome, fast way to come up to speed on my code base.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very complicated, you can see I've got all kinds of APIs and things going on. Gives me a really good summary of what's happening here.
Awesome.
Now, I would really love to do the right thing and think forward into the next developer. So what are some of the other things that Copilot might be able to do for me? I'm going to go over into my orders API, and I see I've got to get orders async, and somebody didn't do what I like to see, and that's document that code. So I would like to maybe just right-click here and ask Copilot, can I do a /doc? If I hit enter, it's actually going to look at the code here and create documentation for that particular code.
Awesome, just right in line.
Right in line.
You don't even have to change the cursor.
Nope, awesome.
That's cool.
Now I can also do other / commands like generate a test by doing /test. I can do a /fix if I had an error in there, and a lot of other good / commands here. Now, super helpful, I can go ahead and accept this. I can jump over into my git changes, and Copilot can also help me write that commit message after I save it. I would probably just say documented. So this is going to generate a really nice message for me. Now I love doing code here, but I'm an Azure developer, okay? At least I aspire to be.
Right.
All right. Now,
No pun intended.
no pun intended. So what I would like to understand is how my code works in Azure, and maybe Copilot can help me do that. But what if I could just go into Copilot, and I'll start a new chat here, and maybe use an Azure command. What if I could type @Azure and ask a question specifically to Azure? Why might I use would, if I could type would, I use a storage blob? And I'm going to try and hit enter here. Maybe I can zoom it. That's a skill. All right. And you can see I've got the new GitHub Copilot for Azure capability built into Visual Studio. And what this is doing here is it's taking my question and it's going to look at all of our Microsoft Learned content and take my question and apply that over those. And I said, bulb, hopefully it understands what I'm saying.
Okay.
Right?
The query's already
The
been
biggest
issued.
challenge when giving a talk at Build is learning how to spell, apparently. So what we want to do is actually look across all of our Learn content and take my question and say, hey, why would an Azure storage blob?
Oh, and it got
look at that.
the blob
Awesome.
storage. That's awesome.
Right? Okay. And give me what are the reasons why I might want to use that. Now, the other thing that this Copilot agent will do, GitHub Copilot for Azure, will actually understand about my code, me as a developer, and how I'm married to Azure and all of my subscriptions as well. So why is that important? Why is that awesome? I'm going to get out of this, zoom it here. And what if I could look at my application and how it's deployed to Azure? Now, I could go into the Azure portal. I could click around a lot of the blades and try and figure out how it's deployed and things like that. But what if I could ask how the eShop is deployed to Azure Container Apps? So what if I could ask @Azure, can you list, again with the spelling, list my containers, container apps, a summary and URI.
So in this case, you're not just asking Learn content, information that you can get from the internet, but you're asking about your specific Azure subscription.
Correct. Now, this is, again, an Aspire app. It's been deployed to Azure Container Apps using our Azure Developer CLI mechanisms. Again, Azure Container Apps can be complicated. I want to understand how it's put together, what those purposes are. It's going to understand that I'm working, again, in Visual Studio. It knows that it's been deployed here. It's going to look at those container resources and nicely give me a good summary of how that stuff is all put together.
So not only do you not have to hunt and peck all over the internet
Right.
to find the information, but you also don't have to hunt and peck all over the Azure portal.
And I don't have to leave Visual Studio.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
it's getting my container resources. It's going to bring it into a good summary. It's going to ask the LLM to kind of put together a good representation of what my question should be and how it should be formulated, so I can basically read through this and say, maybe where's my web app? Where's my basket API, and how I might be able to get back to it. So now it's thinking about how to formulate that response. There's a lot involved in apparently this application, how it might be able to put together that list.
And it's kind of an ambiguous question as well.
Yeah, I
Probably
mean,
has to-
what's a URI? Like, that's a
Yeah.
very specific term. And look at this, we've got a good summary here. The app is running successfully in a maximum of 10, it's thinking about that response with the next word, 10 replicas. So it even knows how it's being scaled for this first app name. And it's going to give me a list of each one of those on how those container apps are actually deployed here. It even gives me a clickable link that I can actually click and it'll take me to the portal.
A deep link directly into the portal. Awesome.
Which is pretty awesome. Now, one of the things that we have done as a part of this application is I've configured application insights, profiler, all of the right things when it comes to putting up telemetry on my app. Now, I'm hoping that everything is working great and I have no problems with this. But what if I did and I don't know that? I'm going to start a new chat here and I'm going to ask here, Azure, can you help fix, I got to spell fix again, any code optimizations? Code optimizations. I've really challenged myself with some spelling this time.
So this is not just really real code, right? This is real typing.
This is also real typing. I need a co-pilot for typing, apparently. So maybe I could use some speech to text. That would be a good addition for our app here. So here, again, it's going to look at my deployment in Azure, look at the app insights and the profiler, figure out if is there anything that we can improve upon that's actually in our code, right? So now it's going to do that query, do those Kusto queries, because nobody likes to write those deep queries in Kusto.
And you can forget, like every time, you figured it out last week, but then you need to do it again. What was that?
And you see here, it's identified our performance issues in our application by an ID, which is really good. I wouldn't even know where to look for that. You see it's highlighted some code already.
Wow.
So that's awesome. It's already identified where I've got some issues.
So it's actually navigating for you in Visual Studio to where the issue is.
And you'll see that it says generating a fix for this issue. So while it's generating some fix, I can actually come over here and look and say, I wonder what the problem might be. We've got some order by, some queries, a to list. Maybe I should be doing something a little different here. So now it's going to generate a fix here. Let me just zoom out while it's doing that. And it should give me a good summary response of what the problem is and give me some code that I can then do a comparison on here. It says, great, sure, I can help you with that. I need Copilot too.
It's a little,
Everybody's doing Copilot today.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the Copilot in the world happening right now.
So here it says, I've identified that we've got a to-list problem. It's taking too much CPU and memory. That's something we would want to fix.
Yeah.
Right? So here it says, maybe you should try this code. It's identifying what the changes are. Types better than I do. And we should get a preview button here. It's got a copy where I could copy this code block here. But once it's finished rendering, we should be able to get a preview side by side, which is really nice. I'm able to read through the changes here, and I can make a summary to myself. Like, I can see what it's doing. I can understand it.
Oh, and then it's explaining.
Yeah, it modifies the get all items method and what I should do. So I can do a preview, gives me that side by side. Again, I can accept and write my changes. So this is a really good, productive way for me to do all of my work, look at my deployed app in Azure, and not really have to change my ID and get the help with Azure.
That's awesome. Thanks,
Cool.
Shayne.
You're welcome.
Cool. All right. So hopefully, by the way, Shayne, was that a Copilot PC that you were going on?
Yeah, it was. This is our new Copilot Plus PCs. We forgot one part. So yes, this is our ARM64 platform. I'm actually running Docker Desktop on ARM64 as well. It was also announced. And Visual Studio is also running our ARM64 here. And I was working on an AKS section as well on another app. And when we're building that, you can see that we are actually running an AMD 64 platform. And it runs super fast as well.
Super awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shayne.
All right.
All right. So there you go. You guys saw he was working on an ARM64 machine, the new machine, and you saw him use GitHub Copilot for Azure so that he could actually learn about Azure, but not just learn about Azure, actually go and see which Azure resources his particular application was using, and then diagnose and even fix an issue. So developers in Visual Studio and VS Code can build and troubleshoot and deploy their applications in Azure using the GitHub Copilot for Azure. So they can use Copilot Chat to learn about Azure resources and best practices, to explore and manage their resources right from the code editor and troubleshoot those issues and look at all of the relevant logs and code that they need to improve their time to remediation. So it's a really helpful tool. Now, GitHub Copilot for Azure is actually built on top of a general extensibility surface area that we've introduced into GitHub Copilot. So now your AI pair programmer can have expertise not just in your code or your solution or just in Azure, but actually what's happening in your Docker containers and in your launched Darkly experiments and your Lambda test results and much, much more. And we're just getting started. So you soon really won't have to do very much context switching at all, because you'll be able to access all of that naturally in the flow of your code editor where you want to be spending all of your time. Now, all of that is in the latest version of Visual Studio 2022, 17.10, which is now ready for all of you to pick up today. So in this version, we've plugged GitHub Copilot in everywhere throughout the IDE. You saw Shayne point out a few references in there, but also like exception helpers and changing the commit log and things like that. It'll help you find and fix those issues. And Shayne was working on an ARM64 device. So we're also extending the SQL Server developer tools support in Visual Studio to ARM64, in addition to Visual Studio itself running natively in ARM64. So whether you're working on a traditional x86 machine or you're working on an ARM64 box, we've got you covered here. Now, in fact, you also saw Shayne show you that Docker Desktop is now fully compatible with Windows on ARM devices. And due to the great partnership that we've had across the Microsoft team and the Docker team over the past few years, you can use Docker's full suite of containerization tools natively on your preferred tools or in Microsoft DevBox or any of the tools with the Visual Studio family. Now, you also heard Shayne reference 𝗦𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗃 at the beginning of the demo. He was working on an app based on 𝗦𝗲𝗃, which codifies the best practices for cloud-native development with tools for multi-project management, built-in HTTP resiliency, health checks, open telemetry, and easy multi-node deployment with the Azure Developer CLI. So today, we're super proud to announce that it's GA, general availability, and 𝗦𝗲𝗃𝗃 really makes it easy to get started with a set of templates that are integrated into Visual Studio that have curated components based on our opinionated stack, what we use internally at Microsoft, that we've actually codified into the 𝗦𝗲𝗃𝗃 framework, and we've made it available to you. So let's take a look at 𝗦𝗲𝗃𝗃.
Applications easier and more productive than ever, whether it's a single project or an entire distributed system with all of its services.
Oop. That didn't play right. There you go.
And to make building great cloud-native applications easier and more productive than ever, whether it's a single project or an entire distributed system with all of its services and dependencies running together. Here I have a cache running in a container, an API service, and a front end all running on my local machine. Aspire orchestrates these all together, so I don't have to worry about spinning up multiple projects or the containers. It does it all for me from a single .NET-based project. The dashboard is a one-stop shop for all things app diagnostics, monitoring, and so much more, enabling me to inspect various states and statuses of my application. We enable health checks, telemetry, resiliency, all for you automatically with our service defaults. We can see that telemetry information is coming in here thanks to the Aspire components. And traces are a great way to pinpoint performance problems or failures, especially when they span multiple processes and machines. Additionally, service discovery built into Aspire converts user-friendly names into network addresses, so we handle everything for you. When you're ready to publish, you can right-click Publish, and it will automatically take your application, convert it to containers, and publish it directly to Azure Container Apps or other places that you want to deploy.
Awesome. So that's 𝗦𝗫𝗃𝗃, and you guys can basically get started to deploy it to production today. So we've shown you how you can go from frustration to focus and bring the best of the tools to where you live in your favorite code editing tools so that you guys can all stay in the flow. But now let's start exploring the next generation of technology, generative AI. Now, Satya and Kevin talked about some truly mind-blowing generative AI applications earlier. And while it might seem complicated at first glance, I want you guys all to know just how easy it is to actually get started with building an intelligent app. In fact, if you've got an API, you're already ready to go. But like this app from TomTom, in the age of AI, the way intelligent apps change experiences and operations are really what can become the competitive differentiators. So it starts by thinking about the use cases where your data can provide actionable insights that can improve your processes or your customer experience. And recognize that this is a massive paradigm shift. It's changing user expectations for how we all interact with technology. Natural language is the new user interface, and we simply talk to it. And I can ask it questions and when I ask it questions, it already has the context of my account or my history, and it can even anticipate my needs. And all of these apps continually improve while learning in production. And so every day, developers are using Gen AI to push the boundaries of what's possible. In fact, Providence Health used Azure OpenAI to create a message triage tool streamlining digital healthcare. That system now handles 5,000 daily messages across 145 clinics and 650 providers so they can focus on patient care instead of their email inbox. Albert Heijn, the leading Dutch supermarket chain, uses AI for demand forecasting across 15 million store item combinations, which allows them to reduce their food waste by over 10%. And the NBA is using data-driven insights to offer a personalized fan experience that gives them the history and the context of their fans' engagement to ramp up excitement. And McDonald's China is opening over 1,000 outlets per year, and they're actually using this in their employee education center, which is called Hamburger University, and they use AI to provide AI assistance to their students, enhanced search and document translation so that they can kind of train their workforce more easily and quickly. Now, in building all of our copilots, we've obviously been developing GitHub Copilot for the last few years. We've learned that it really requires a new set of tasks for developers. The developer iteration loop, which encompasses both the individual developer cycles and the product validation cycles, it involves a significant evolution when building intelligent apps. So beyond advanced DevOps practices like CI/CD, developers have to learn how to create prompts and optimize app performance and LLM calls and monitor performance throughout controlled experimentation in production as their users interact with the systems whose responses from the LLM might not always be perfectly predictable. So writing those kinds of apps can actually be really challenging, and you need a new set of tools. So today we're announcing the AI Toolkit for Visual Studio Code, which will help developers develop and deploy intelligent applications by enabling them to explore, acquire, evaluate, and integrate small and large language models with Visual Studio Code. And you can use your local hardware to try, run, and evaluate state-of-the-art small language models, or SLMs, like the 𝗲3 that Kevin was talking about earlier. And it takes advantage of the deep investments that we've made in the ML stack on Windows to give you a really turnkey, fast experience that you can use on your laptop, on DevBox, or in Azure AI Compute. And it runs best on Windows today, but macOS is coming really soon. And so I'd like to welcome John Lamb to show you the new AI Toolkit for Visual Studio Code so you can get up and running in no time.
Hello, Build. Shayne showed us some great AI features for building eShop in the last demo. I'm going to show you how to use AI in eShop. It has this cool AI feature that lets me ask questions about products, but I've seen it struggle with subtle off-topic questions like this one. Now, eShop does have jackets, but I'm pretty sure that the Summit Pro jacket isn't. What's that?
Push the button. We can.
Ooh!
This button. There you
Push
go.
the button! Push the button. OK, there we go.
Okay.
Now it's real.
Okay.
Subtle off-topic questions like this one here. So in this demo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use AI Toolkit to teach the AI to refuse to answer off-topic questions like this one. I'm going to do this by fine-tuning a small language model to do this task better than GPT-3.5 Turbo, which generated the response that you see here. Now, earlier today, you heard some exciting announcements about the Microsoft 𝗲𝗃 family of small language models. Their small size makes them really easy to work with. They can run on low-powered devices, even locally, and they train and fine-tune really, really fast. So the first focus area of the AI Toolkit is a model playground. And what that lets you do is download and test the latest small language models locally. The catalog that you see here is managed by the team today, but soon we're going to open it up to enable you to access all the models in the Azure AI Model Catalog, as well as in Hugging Face.
Awesome.
So let's take a look at a model that I've downloaded earlier. My favorite hello world joke task or prompt these days is tell me a dad joke, don't explain it. Now, you know how dads like to explain their jokes to you. Well, 𝗲𝗃 likes to do that too. And you can see that the dad is powerful in this model here. Now, you might be surprised to hear that I'm running all of this on a Microsoft Dev box. This is an 8-core CPU with 64 gigabytes of RAM, but it doesn't have a GPU. Now, the cool thing about the small size of these small language models is we can run them on just a CPU, which is pretty cool. So let's get back to improving our AI. First, let's see how it works. GPT-3.5 Turbo is used in 2 places. In the first place, it tries to predict categories of products using the user's question as the prompt. If it doesn't predict any categories, it politely refuses to answer the question. Otherwise, it will take the prompt and the user question and retrieve a relevant set of documents from the catalog, which it then sends back to GPT-3.5 Turbo to answer the question that the user asked. Now, that was the prompts. Let's take a quick look at the code that calls the models. This code was written using LangChain, which is a popular open source AI framework for Python and JavaScript. And what this means is that the AI Toolkit lets you use any framework and any language to create your AI features. Now, let's get back to the task of replacing GPT-3.5 Turbo with 𝗲𝗃 Mini to predict these product categories. Every time I make a change, I want to be able to measure the impact of that change. And that brings me to the second focus area of the AI Toolkit, which is evaluations. So let's evaluate the performance of the 𝗲𝗃 Mini model in predicting categories using this data file to ensure reproducibility. This file contains questions, and it contains AI-generated answers and the ground truth answers. Now, I can measure or grade the difference between the answer and the ground truth answers either manually, or I could ask an AI to go do that for me. I'm going to show you some manual grading results that I did earlier using the Azure AI Studio to view our results. Now, for 𝗲𝗃, you can see it's about 14% accurate at predicting product categories from the user's question. Now, that's not quite as bad as it might seem because the model wasn't trained on the product catalog or user questions.
That's almost like a random guess.
Yes, exactly,
yeah.
yes. But we can dramatically improve the performance of the model by training it on your proprietary data to get better results. Mm-hmm. So let's see how well we can do to improve this with further training. I'm going to use this data set of 2,300 questions and answers about eShop products. And these questions are roughly split between questions that are answerable as well as off-topic questions. Now, the AI Toolkit is going to go use this file to further train the model in a process that we like to call fine-tuning. To kick off our fine-tuning job, all we need to do is check in the file. So let's go do this.
So once you check in the file, then it automatically kicks off the tests?
It kicks off the fine-tuning job.
Awesome.
Right? And so the cool thing about this is, you need a lot of GPU power to go do this. Mm-hmm. And so the Azure AI Toolkit will run this job in Azure Container Apps using an NVIDIA A100 GPU with 80 gigabytes of RAM. So remember like how you could goof off when you're waiting for your project to compile? Well, now as an AI engineer, you can goof off by waiting for your model to fine tune. Both of those fun tasks get kicked off by running a GitHub action. So let's kind of take a look at its progress.
And how long does this usually take?
So in this case, in this model, it takes about 8 minutes to go run this job. And rather than having you watch it go off and run the job, I'm going to switch to a job that I completed earlier. So the fine-tuned model now completes this categorization task with 91% accuracy, which is a huge improvement over the 14% accuracy that we had with the base 𝗲𝗃 mini model.
And that can run locally at 90% accuracy.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yes. And the other cool thing is, it's a substantial improvement over GPT-3.5 Turbo, where we started from, which was 45% accurate. So now that we've been able to see these kinds of results, I feel pretty good about creating a dev deployment on Azure so that the other eShop developers can run their integration tests on this. And I'm going to call this version V2. So do you remember how the AI toolkit lets you use any framework in any language to create your AI feature? The way it does this is by generating a Docker file. And this Docker file lists all of your dependencies and references all of the code in your AI feature, which makes it really easy for you to go off and deploy your AI feature to a GPU-powered Azure Container Apps environment. Now, I've done that for you already, and I've also updated eShop to use the V2 AI feature. So let's take a look at how it handles that problematic prompt. What's a good invisible jacket for trekking? Perfect. It's now refusing to answer the job just like we expected, or we hoped at the beginning of all of this. And just to make sure that we're not tricking you and refusing to answer all questions, what's a good jacket for skiing? Great.
Awesome.
So that completes our whirlwind tour of the AI toolkit. To recap, I was able to replace GPT-3.5 Turbo with my fine-tuned 𝗲𝗃 small language model. By fine-tuning it on my own data set, I was able to increase the accuracy from 14 to 91% with just 8 minutes of fine-tuning on an Azure A100 GPU.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Thank
and you
you.
did all of that in the context of Visual Studio Code and the AI toolkit with prompt evaluation basically persisted as source.
Absolutely.
Super
Yes.
awesome.
Great.
Thanks,
Yep.
John. All right. That's pretty cool. And because it's directly in the tools that you're familiar with, it makes it so much easier to learn about these new jobs to be done, these new tasks that you have to do as you're building intelligent applications. And it's just one more way for you to continue your lifelong journey as learners. So that you can become experts in Gen AI. So we're in the flow, we're learning how to use new technology, but how can I make sure that my team benefits from what I've learned? And how can we make sure that our team doesn't have to reinvent the wheel every single time? Following paved paths really makes it easier to ensure that the apps that our organizations are building are at higher quality and they meet the expectations for security and compliance and cost. Developers really want to be able to self-serve environments. They don't want to have to go to a meeting to be able to get those resources. They want the workflows and the infrastructure and the confidence that they're adhering to the best practices of their organization so they can focus on their code. And these start right templates allow you to assemble your own opinionated stack while getting out of the way so that your developers on your team can continue to innovate. Now, those start right templates include workflows and config as code that then lead to successful and efficient operations. And through automated templates and shift left notifications and in-tool assistance, that's really our strategy inside of Microsoft to make sure that our developers can start and stay on that paved path. With policy enforcement and security monitoring and observability, the organizations can then govern their app estate so that they can get better cost control and reduce risks while also delivering a fantastic developer experience. So We call this practice of streamlining the developer experience and operational efficiency while delivering on the goals and the requirements of the organization. We call that platform engineering. And GitHub Copilot, with its new extensibility surface area, is now the perfect platform to deliver an unparalleled developer experience for platform engineering. So I'd like to welcome Mark Weitzel to come and show us how.
Sounds great. I'm going to push the button.
Push the button. Go for it.
All right. Now, I'm going to run this in a dev box because I didn't get a cool machine, didn't get approved.
Got the mid-level?
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right, all right.
Amanda.
Well,
All right,
you have
okay.
unlimited dev boxes, Mark.
So, so I am a developer on the eShop application with Shayne. And as our application has grown and as we've learned to manage OpenAI apps in the wild, we've certainly learned a lot. One of the things we learned is we need to add better observability and metrics, especially around token usage. And we probably, because the number of users of our application has grown, we need to scale that, probably by adding another instance and adding it in a different region. Now, that's a lot of complexity. I don't know how to do that, but my platform engineering team has written a Copilot extension, and I'm super comfortable in Copilot, so I'm gonna start there.
Awesome.
So here I am in VS Code, and I'm going to say at Contoso ES, because that's our engineering system. How can I get better token metrics for my app? And what's happening now is the Copilot extension is going out and looking at all of those paved paths that you talked about earlier. And those paved paths are tailored to our organization, our best practices, our opinionated stack. And it's going to determine if there is one that matches matches my request. And there's one right there. So my platform engineering team has done some work for me. Looks like a pretty good starting point. So I'm going to say, yeah, let's start there.
So this is just a kind of taking the template that you've predefined as a platform engineer,
Whoops.
and now kind of figuring out that it wants to use that.
That's exactly, whoa, there we go. We're having all kinds of problems today.
Opening your email? All
I
right.
know, there we go. Let's see if it picks that one up for me. And again, as the Copilot extension replies with information, it's going to take some action inside both Azure and the API management GenAI gateway, as well as my repository. So it manages my identity between both systems and understands that. And as I look at this, it looks at the models that I have, and it looks like a good starting point, and it's going to update the open endpoint and open key that are in the repository. And I know Shayne's a crack developer, and he already enabled that. So I'm going to confirm that and say, yes, that's exactly what I would like to do. And so at this point, it's taken all that information, it's given it to our Copilot extension, it's processing that information, and it's coming back with the required input that I need to provide. Now, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to get for the default token metrics there, so I'm going to ask, explain default token metrics. Now, I think this is great, and I know that like Colby and Chuck think this is great, because the way I do that is I get on Teams, I'm like, hey, Chuck, what does this thing do? And like I hunt people down, and now I don't have to do that. I know that the information, because it's in that template, is up to date, it's accurate, and it's going to be exactly what I need. And it looks like I'm going to get a really good starting point for metrics on my OpenAI application. So that's what I would like to do. And so I'm going to go ahead and submit that. So all of that information is up to date. It understood the context that I did, and now it's gone off and submitted that request to onboard me into the API management, OpenAI Gen gateway capabilities. It's going to enable the default metrics. It's going to give me a new endpoint. It's going to update my repository. And let's take a look at that now.
Awesome. So it's already kicked off.
It's already kicked off.
And you did that all from Visual Studio Code.
All from Visual Studio Code.
Awesome.
Without going to Teams to,
And without having to kick off something even in GitHub.
without even having to kick off anything in GitHub. So there's my repository. And here is 𝗦𝗽𝗀𝗻. And it takes a few minutes to run, so I've gone ahead and easy baked one here. And you can see that if I look at this, the policies that we had are applied here. Let's see. And then we can look at the endpoint that will be updated inside of our repository. Let's go take a look at that now. There we go. And if we scroll down here, we can see that this is the endpoint that came back in our template that we said, hey, this is what's going to be updated inside of your repository. We'll refresh that to see if it actually finished, because sometimes it takes a little bit.
Now. It says now.
Just now.
Yeah.
And there it is. There's the one that was just done, easy bake. And so the best part about this is, as a developer, I can just start working with the app again and see if it can recommend some goggles. So there were no changes to the application that I had to do. It just simply picked up the new endpoint for me that was created when I was onboarded and updated my repository, and I was good to go. When that app is redeployed, all those changes will be picked up. And what will happen is, now that I start getting token metrics in, I can put that on an App Insights dashboard, and I can see how the use of the chat interacts with the use of my application. And that was it. No meetings, no team messages, nothing that I had to do. It was just all done for me by my platform engineering team through the Copilot extension.
Super awesome. So basically, through that, in Visual Studio Code, you modified your GitHub workflow, you modified your Azure resources, and ultimately you enabled observability that now lets you monitor the traffic and make sure that you're using it in a cost-efficient way.
In minutes.
Super awesome. Thanks, Mark. All right. So what you guys all saw there was a great example of how Azure is evolving to be able to support the latest building blocks that you need to be able to build your applications best on Azure as you build intelligent applications. And all of these things are integrated seamlessly together so that you can use them without having interruption. And Azure has support for experimentation. You can use VectorDB add-ons in your GenAI apps. They can run on any of our app platform services. And we have the broadest selection of frontier and open models and best-in-category third-party integration from Confluent and Elastic and Astronomer and Hugging Face and Split.io and Pinecone and Arise and Llama Index and LangChain. So a lot of the AI ecosystem is now getting integrated into Azure. So whether your opinionated stack uses the GenAI gateway in Azure, API management, or dynamic sessions in Azure Container Apps, or Azure Kubernetes Automatic, you can now kind of integrate that into all of your solutions. Now, how did that actually work? I actually want to hand it back to Mark to show you that example. Do I need to press the button?
Number 4.
There you go.
Yep. All right, I'm back, but I'm no longer a developer. I'm a platform engineer, and that's awesome. Now, as a platform engineer, I live and die with GitHub Actions, with ASDO pipelines. These are critical ways for me to scale automation across my organization. Now, we just saw how I was able to onboard a developer's application to the API management OpenAI Gen gateway. And we did that in minutes. And what happened behind the scenes is we simply enabled a GitHub action to go off and do that automation. And it was run on behalf of that developer. And you can see that it recognizes my identity as well. So let's go ahead and see how we do that. Now, to do that, we need really 2 things. The first thing we need is a repository that houses those GitHub actions. And we need to have that repository tell our GitHub Copilot, hey, I bring workflows that you can surface. And we do that through custom properties. And so here we have the custom property for this workflow that says, we bring workflows to the Copilot. And the next thing we need is a GitHub action. And so here it is. I'm going to go in and, you know what? Why don't you create a GitHub action here for us? And let's show how easy it is to go ahead and actually create one of these things that our Copilot extension can use.
All right.
So we can start with the start right template that we did here.
So I want to press configure.
You do?
All right.
All right. This is like old school pair programming here. All right, and now we can, let's do chaos testing. So there's probably some good chaos testing that we want to do. So
Okay.
now when we give it a good name here, something about chaos testing,
right.
this is part of what the Copilot extension is going to use to figure out what your developer is trying to do.
Or key vault,
Yeah,
something like that. Okay.
yeah, and you might want to put in deny access too.
Where do I do the deny
Yeah,
access?
right up here.
Deny access.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Great.
Now, the next thing that it needs is a nice description here. So while you're typing in the description, go down a little bit lower into the environment. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah,
this
right
workflow
there.
is used to.
Now, this is, if you remember when I was in the Copilot extension. Oh, so it's not
tabs.
used to that. Let's go back. Yep, there we go. There we go.
Mark, why don't you finish this?
All right, I'll
item?
do that. All right, so we'll do it real quick. Okay. So we'll create one here. We will create one here. We will go back. So we'll go back to our repository. Here we go. We'll go back to actions. And we'll go here to our start right. And here's the one, and we'll just say, hey, let's do some chaos testing. And I can't type either, Shayne. Now, if you remember, this is the description here that we have that talks about what this template's going to do. And so when I was looking earlier for that enable the standard AI policies, this is where some of that information is taken from. And so this is how you know this is going to be up to date. All right, so now we've got that. And I'm just going to commit this, and of course, you know, I like to live on the edge, so I'm going to go right commit it right domain.
All right.
Now let's go back to our eShop repository that we were working on. And I'll just hop back over here, go to the repos. And the reason I'm coming back over here to the demo repository that we have is I want you to notice that I'm invoking this directly from GitHub. So before we were invoking this from Visual Studio Code, and now I'm going to invoke this directly from GitHub.
Awesome. So you literally just now committed this.
Just now.
This new workflow.
Just now.
And it's going to actually go and detect that this workflow has been added, and then Copilot is going to respond with that context.
Yes. And it's going to look and see which one it thinks is the best one. So let's do a little, let's see if we can do here. And you notice that here the Copilot extension responded with a number of templates. And that's because the information that we put in there, that looks like an authorization error.
Yeah.
So the information that we put in there is used when we, to surface that. So if I might have to log in here again. So why don't we do that? And then we'll go from there.
All right.
All right.
OK. Why don't I explain kind of what's been happening here as Mark kind of shows you that. Let's switch back to the slides. Am I back to slides? There we go. OK. So what you saw in Mark's demo is that GitHub Copilot can be used to, it can actually be augmented and grounded with your product catalog that you define in GitHub repos with templates and workflows and APIs and samples that provide start-right automation and policy enforcement to your developers who discover and deploy them with natural language interfaces in Copilot chat, which is pretty awesome. All right. I think we are. OK, so I don't think we can switch back. So I think
why
we're
don't we
just
go
going
ahead
to
and wrap up
finish
then?
up. Yeah, I'm
Perfect.
just going to wrap up. All right. So how do you guys all make sure that your developers get all of this? Well, you really want to standardize your developer experience on Microsoft Dev Boxes, which are cloud-hosted, ready-to-code workstations, which are used by over 25,000 Microsoft developers. And Dev Boxes reduce environment setup time from days to minutes, encouraging collaboration and experimentation. And with pre-installed tools and source code, developers can onboard and start coding quickly. So developer agility really comes from team agility. We've recently added standardized templates with project-level catalogs specific to each project that you manage. And we also have a new DevBox imaging service so that teams can create and maintain custom image definitions using config as code to make sure that your team has a consistent environment with all the tools and the SDKs and the apps that your team needs to be successful. Now, dev boxes are secure workstations that are enrolled in Intune and centrally managed, and admins can secure dev boxes at the network layer with project-specific settings. And we've integrated DevBox with Azure Monitor so that you can get deeper insights into your developer environments, and Visual Studio provides additional analysis so you can look at your trusted projects and the success of your end user developers' experiences. But you can have a consistent environment across the team while still making it personalized for you. So we have settings and recommendations for visually impaired users using screen readers so that you can actually make sure that you're setting up with Windows accessibility settings and make sure that it's pre-configured with all of the Visual Studio settings that you're dependent upon, including screen readers like JAWS and NVDA. And DevBox works beautifully with the new Windows Dev Home experience, which makes it easier to create a personalized environment. Now, with the Windows Dev Home experience, it's simple to create and connect and customize dev boxes and pin frequently used dev boxes to your taskbar or your start menu, and to add tools and packages and even source code repository setup into your personalized config or the image that you're using for the team. And so that can allow you to make sure that everyone is using an ultra-fast dev drive. Now, there's a lot more to managing a modern cloud-native application than just setting up the necessary SDKs in your own personal dev box. You really need a complete engineering system that's pretty complex. How complex? This complex. If I was a new developer joining a team and I had to set up this environment on my own, it would be pretty easy for me to make a mistake. And I might even open up a security hole. And the organization that I work for probably doesn't want me to have this much control over those resources. It's also not exactly how I want to be spending my time as a dev. So Azure Deployment Environments enables developers and their teams to self-serve application resources with the productivity, the security, and the cost controls that the organization seeks, while ensuring the developers can stay in their favorite tools like GitHub and Visual Studio. And the new extensibility model and the ability to customize deployments based on your team needs allows you to use popular third-party infrastructure as code frameworks like Pulumi quickly and easily. So that was a lot of fun. With our tools and platform, you can get in the zone, experiment and learn, rapidly iterate, and build the best intelligent applications, and create paved paths for everyone on your team so you all can learn together and have the best developer experience. Now, to learn more about all of the topics that we just talked about, including a lot more on DevBox and Azure Deployment Environments, you can even stay here for the next session. There's a lot more to learn. And I just want to say, thank you all for coming. Thanks for building what you build. Developer Joy is about being able to set up a complete and compliant engineering system in seconds and to be able to contribute from any device. Can't wait to see what you all build. Happy coding.